All right, good morning, good afternoon, folks. I see some folks jumping on right now. Welcome to our session today. As we wait for some additional attendees to join us, I'd love to hear or see in the chat box, where are folks calling in or dialing in from? Dialing in, I don't even know why we still say dialing in. We should stop calling it that. Nice. Welcome, folks. Hi, John. Welcome.
Northern Virginia. Welcome. I'm in Ashburn.
Nobody from Atlanta yet? I'm starting to feel a bit lonely in Atlanta.
We've got like the great split between, oh no, we've got someone in the central there. Welcome, Sam, Dallas. All right, well, folks, as everyone's jumping in, definitely use the chat box. Looking forward to an exciting conversation today. My name is Marjorie Abdelkrim, and I'm a Senior Director at VMware. I lead our cloud technical sales team for the Americas. So quite excited to have this awesome conversation here today with Vikram and David on just the power of data and how we can influence pre-sales with information as something that we can push forward within our organizations. So I'm going to ask folks a quick poll question before we go into introducing the panel members. But I'd love to know, what are your roles today? What do you do? And then we'll take it from there and give you guys a couple seconds here. We even have someone from India. That's awesome. How late is it over there right now? That's some dedication. All right, so we've got about 86% of the folks have voted, and we have a good mix between leadership and individual contributors, which is awesome because I think what we'll talk about today will really highlight for the individual contributors why your leadership tends to ask for information and for data points, and for the leaders, some really creative ideas from other SE leaders in the industry about how they're using data to really influence the decision-making as well as how they go to market as an organization. So with that, I want to go ahead and introduce our panel here of esteemed SE leaders. So Vikram, tell us a little bit about yourself and give us a little bit about your background.
Sure thing. Thanks, Marjorie. Firstly, I'm really excited to be here. I work for Akamai Technologies. I'm a senior director. I manage all the pre-sales there for North America and LATAM teams. Making data-driven decision-making is a huge interest of mine and a passion. So I'm really excited to be here to join you folks in having some discussions and learning.
Thanks, Vikram. David.
Happy to be here as well. I am at MRI Software. I lead the global pre-sales organization for them. I am about 6 months into that role, recently from Adobe and Marketo. So I've got about 22 years in pre-sales and pre-sales leadership, and looking to help them grow and scale the company to the next stage of their evolution. And data has been central to that effort and will continue to be central to that effort.
Welcome, both of you. I'm really excited about this talk here. Definitely, I think a lot of great information today. So for folks kind of wondering, what are we going to talk about? Oh, and I was supposed to say thank you. Sorry, I was supposed to remember all of this. First of all, thank you for all of the awesome, contribution that all of you have been having. If you're not part of the actual site, please take a moment and join, and I'll share some more towards the end about our Slack channel. We talked about our poll there. So what are you going to get today from today's session? So as we mentioned, data, really. So what can you, why did that move over? What can you gain and how can you elevate the function of the SE team within an organization How can you leverage some of the activity data that, again, that some of the leadership team will ask you for as a leading indicator to pipeline? And this one is always of huge interest to a lot of the SE leaders. What you do on a day-to-day basis contributes to forecast accuracy, and this one's huge here at VMware. We use it quite often to help balance where our forecast really truly is. And then really one passionate topic for me is really around enablement and how we use data to direct the team enablement. So with that, we'll go ahead and kick off into our second poll. And this is not meant to judge, it's just meant to kind of just gauge a little bit more about where you all stand from a data perspective. But I'm curious to know, how mature is your pre-sales organization with regard to data-driven decision-making? And again, no right or wrong answer, definitely just interested to see where our audience sits today.
And I think Yuji made these categories, so you can talk to him about the naming conventions that he used.
Right, don't blame any of us. All right, so we've got about, some more people are voting, good, awesome. We've got about 60% of the vote right now, so I'll go ahead and close it out. And I think this is kind of where I would expect it, right? Data aware is where some folks are. You know that there's data out there. You're not really, fully using it. And then there's a good chunk of you that are data influenced, right? And are actually using that data to help manage the business, whether it be as an SE or as a leader. I think it's important to understand that both sides of the roles will actually really leverage data for their function. So with that, David, you talk about how you leverage, activity as a leading indicator for pipeline. So wanted to take a moment here and hear a little bit from you about how you're using this information.
Sure. So a little bit about my story. As I said, I'm fairly new to MRI, so I needed to come in and kind of understand what's going on before I start making any changes to the team, and understand how the team's performing and what we're going to need to do to scale to the next level. So I needed to assess what kind of data we have, look at what data was existing, and then kind of make an assessment of what additional data do I need to make some of those decisions. And ultimately, I think we all need data to be able to prove our impact. So that's where I kind of started from, and that's the background of my story. So I think for a pre-sales organization or any sales related function, you're going to need to look at what data you have in your CRM or your customer relationship management solution, whatever that may be. In our case, we already had an existing Salesforce instance, but as I started looking into that, there was a wide variation, and there wasn't a whole lot of granularity, Marjorie, in the data that I was able to look at and access. So we did have some basic functionality of how to request SEs, but we have in my particular situation, we have a lot of product lines, and I needed to better understand how much effort was going into each individual product line, right? And not just actual demo delivery, but also the preparation and the things that go into that. So I'll start out with 3 fundamental concepts that I'm going to be talking about, and it's activities, deliverables, and outcomes. So activities are the things that we do to prepare for demos. And in my role, I have responsibility really for 3 different types of deliverables. So demonstrations, product demonstrations, proof of concepts, and then bid management, RFPs, security docs, what have you. So I look at those as kind of my big rocks, if you will. And then the things that roll up into those deliverables are activities. So demo preparation, travel to and from meeting sites, research on the companies, building out demo data sets. All of these activities lead to deliverables and produce that results or outcomes that we're looking for. So as I started looking at this, I needed to put a new process in place, as I said, because I needed a little bit more information about where we're seeing demand for different products. And also, in my situation, my sales engineering team, they deliver very long demos, but it may consist of multiple products within a product family. So I needed to get better data about how much prep was going into that, how many individual demos were happening. So I needed to upgrade my system, and I started looking at how do I use this to look at leading indicators as well and look at those pipeline metrics. So if you keep that in mind as I talk about this, activities are the things that go into deliverables, and then deliverables drive your outcomes, your results. That's kind of my framework. So with that, it's timely to this conversation. With the COVID virus and everything going on, obviously we went to a lot more, well, completely virtual demos. But not only that, my leadership came to me and said, David, can you give me an idea of how much, impact everything going on had on our activity levels and our demos? And more importantly, as we go to talk to our investors and the board, how can we tell them that we have a handle on activity coming back or our pipeline coming back? Is the pipeline stuff that we're looking at, is that real? Can you give me some data to support that story? And that's how I kind of came to some of these measurements. So with that, right, I wanted to understand really how busy is the team? What are we doing? And are we working on the right things? And then really important, what are the trends? So if we look at activities and deliverables as leading indicators, a couple of things this will help you do, right? You'll be able to provide some of that data back to senior leadership on how are things trending? Are we trending up? Are we trending down? What do we look like month over month and year over year? And obviously, I think a lot of people saw impact in this situation. And it's very important to be able to say, for product line A, we're seeing a significant drop off versus product line B. We're actually seeing a lot of activity there. And we'll probably need to focus our resources more on that product line because it's selling very well. In our particular situation, we have things that we do real estate SaaS software. So with that, we needed tools for people to communicate with tenants and residents electronically, virtually, right, rather than going and knocking on doors. And we saw a significant uptick in that interest for those product lines. So we needed to retool a little bit, change some of our messaging, and pivot and give people demonstrations that acknowledge what's going on in the current business environment. So we started looking at, what do we have upcoming over the next 30 days? Is that a lot of discovery calls? Are there a lot of sales demos that we are doing and we can plan in advance? And I know a lot of you are probably thinking, that's great as long as you can get somebody to record that activity. And that absolutely is part of what your discipline needs to be with this type of a system. You start out with a CRM, and in our case, we brought in a system on top of Salesforce that integrates with Salesforce called Vivin that gave us different types of measurements on these activities and deliverables and what have you. And that allowed me to go back to my leadership and say, we're seeing this type of a trend, we're seeing it for these products. And oh, by the way, the sales pipeline actually does look solid because our data supports that as well. But you do have to have your sales engineering team have an easy way to record this activity. And I will say I've been in both pre-sales and post-sales in my career, and I'm not a huge fan of a lot of administrative overhead for the pre-sales team or any team. I understand, no offense to anyone that does have to record their hours. I've been there, I've done that. But the easier you make that process for your team, the more adoption you will get. So you definitely need to look at tool sets that do it as part of your assignment process. And one thing you might want to keep in mind is looking at tools that have the ability to automate things. So for example, if I assign a demo to an SC, I want to know that automatically I'm going to also assign an hour of demo prep and an hour of company research, right? Those are just rules of thumb or standards. And you can always go in on the back end and adjust and say, hey, I really only needed 30 minutes of prep for that demo. And you can adjust that accordingly if the system makes it easy for you. but it's important to make it smooth and part of the process and reduce the friction for your team. So this particular dashboard example is a leading indicator, right? So we're looking at what are the activities for my team over the next 30 days. And this is just a sample, and I'm only showing one type here, demo prep, but as I said, different type of activities could be travel to and from a client, it could be research for the client, it could be whatever demo environment customization you have. But starting to look at these types of things on an activity basis will also tell you, is your team spending too much time preparing for a certain product? So I have a situation going on right now that due to some product gaps that we have and we're trying to address, my team has to do a lot more extensive preparation for those demos. And having this data in hand, I can now go back to the product owner and say, hey, is there anything we can do with the next product release to maybe take some of this data set prep off of my team, because it's a lot of time investment when it's something that we could probably address upstream in the product. So that's how I like to use activities as a leading indicator for what's coming up over the next 30 days. You can do the same thing for deliverables as well. Any questions from anybody? I know that we've got a chat session going on, but I love to have some interactivity and, address challenges that I had.
So I do have a question for you, David, and I'm technically challenged at this point. I'm going to solve the Q&A issue here in a second, but this was one that I was thinking of. Every time we have thought of, whether it be here at VMware or at other companies, we've thought of introducing activity tracking, similar to what you just said, right? The whole notion of this hourly, having to enter hourly what you're doing, normally tends to present some type of resistance from the SE community. And you talked about how the tooling that you use does that, but how do you also then track other potential forecasts or pipeline activities that are outside of, say, a demo, right? It could be, customer conversation or call, preparing, like you talked a little bit about, and that's something that's outside of the system. How are you managing that, and how is that then received by the SE community?
Absolutely. It is a learning process, and you have to sell your team on this, right? Or as individual contributors listening to this conversation, understand the value in what that admin time brings, right? You put this in and it creates better data, and then it gives leadership better metrics to understand what's going on with the team. Do we have coverage that we need, or are we going to need more coverage? But to your point, right, it has to be part of your process, whether that's manual or automated. Automated's always better, in my opinion. But you don't want to go too crazy with this. So I will say that I only generally check and look at customer-facing activities the most. And certainly that's something that we did a lot at Marketo and Adobe as well. We had the capability to track a lot of different types or even custom activity types. But once you get the system up and you cut out some of the extraneous things that don't contribute to, taking down revenue and pipeline, you use the data initially to restrain some of that type of activity. But your main focus is on customer discoveries, customer demos, customer-facing activity. Because at the end of the day, activity is not the end-all, be-all. Certainly, I think we're going to have more conversation on this discussion about, looking at different metrics, and ultimately outcomes matter the most. You can be very busy and still not have a good win rate, for example. But it is interesting to know, are your requests for demos falling off a cliff? If so, that's not a good sign for your pipeline, regardless of, if you're spending too much time doing things you shouldn't. So you should definitely look at all your activity and even create custom activities if you need to, and do it in a way that creates the least amount of friction for your sales engineering team or pre-sales team. But it is important, especially if you have an issue. So back to my example of having a product where we do a lot on the pre-sales side to kind of cover up some of the product gaps. In those situations, if that's going on, you can record the data for a while and then have a good business case to go to your peer and say, hey, we really need to look at how we're spending too much time on the pre-sale side because there's some things we need to shore up. So that was a little bit long-winded, but hopefully it answered your question.
Yeah, and John actually had asked a similar question, but to add on to that is, where do you track this info at?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we're a Salesforce shop. You can use any CRM you want. I think it's important to have some way to tie back to sales opportunities and revenue, because that's really, at the end of the day, what most of us are going to be judged on, and we're going to make our business cases around. But you start out with your CRM as your system of truth. And then, as I mentioned, in our case, we have a system called Vivin that sits on top of it and gives you predefined dashboards and allows you to make team member requests and specify the activities and deliverables that they're asking for. So that gives me the view of granularity that I need to start reporting back up and start making some of my decisions. But ultimately, you need some case-based system to where somebody requests a resource, you can be granular on what that resource type is. And then based on that, from an SE perspective, it's very nice if you can get another interface, because a lot of my team doesn't necessarily like spending a lot of time in Salesforce or a CRM. There's also a web app and a Chrome plugin for this particular tool set. So as they're going through and scheduling the demo or the discovery or whatever, it's very easy for them just to pop in what they're doing and capture that activity or that deliverable without having to spend all their time in Salesforce. So I think that's an important option to have. And you may need to tune your individual process. But I also go back to my team and I say, this is really something you should be doing on a daily basis. It doesn't take a lot of time to say that, you've got 3 demos, 5 demos next week, whatever. Yes, I know you have to go into the system and do it, but the benefits are massive downstream, because we can see, you can make a case to me for, hey, we need more support with this particular product line because I've got, too many demos next week, not enough time to do prep for custom demos. And, the system needs to support your process. I think the process comes first. You define what your process needs to be, and then you find the tool set to support it.
Yeah, I think that's, a couple of points that you made there are huge, right? The one is the ease of use, making sure that you have a clearly defined process are super important, because if you don't have kind of that clarity of what exactly it is that you're going to do, definitely it creates challenges, because now everyone's solving for an outcome without the steps in between. And yeah, I've seen that be a fun project to lead. So thank you. All right. So go to your next slide here.
All right, so this is just a continuation of the concept, right? So looking out across the next 30 days for activities, you can do the same thing for demos or POCs or RFP responses. And one of my personal principles is to keep it as simple as possible. So simple and consistent, going back to the process every time you know that you have a deal, go ahead, schedule that discovery time, schedule that demo. And then, we also, as part of the system, you want to encourage customer feedback, right? So we're the tip of the spear as pre-sales. We're right there with the sales team. And, I think we need to have a good discipline about capturing what customers are asking for. Are they saying that our competitors have better features in a particular product set? Are they saying that, we need to make changes to our product? This is a very huge value add from a pre-sales perspective, and this can bring us closer to both the sales team and the product team if we're capturing that data effectively and then feeding it back to our peers in product and in sales. So as we schedule these deliverables and we're on these discovery calls, we also need to be capturing data in the system against the opportunities so that we can feed that back to our peers in product and sales.
So, before you close out here on David on this specific question, I always like to ask folks, this one is what's in it for me for the SE, right? So you've given us a great business case from a leadership perspective, why we should care about these data points. But if I were an SE, why do I care? Why should I be compliant? Outside of getting a nice little bonus here and there, why should I care?
Absolutely. So I think there's 2 main things. Number one is I tell everybody, regardless of their role, that you need to know your numbers. So this goes back to being data driven. But if you're going to ask for more money, if you're going to ask for more responsibility, or if you're going to ask for a position or a role with more responsibility, you need to be able to say, I did this many demos last year. I had this win rate for those demos. I put this much time into improving the demo environment so that I made the whole team better. As an individual contributor, you need to know your impact on the team and the organization. And that only gets more important as you progress in your career. And I would say certainly to anyone that has aspirations for leadership or management, you need to understand that these are the type of things that people are going to be looking at. And the better you tell that story, the more impact you're going to have, and you're going to be recognized for having that impact. So I think this is something that will help drive your career and make you more effective in whatever your current role is.
Thanks, David. That's super important. And I like the highlight of, just having the data set to ask for more money. I bet all of the SCs will be very excited about that one. So a pipeline, right, leads to actual deals, right? So this then leads to us being able to manage the business and understanding how our forecast is being reported and making sure that we're driving an accurate forecast. And Vikram, you have some ideas here on how data that the SE contributes helps drive forecast accuracy. So can you share a little bit there for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've all been in meetings where decisions have been made because of an opinion, because there was lack of data. We were faced with a problem, and somebody in that room chose to make a decision based on what they thought was the best outcome. There's a technical term for it. It's called the hippo effect, which is the highest paid person's opinion, right? Which is not always the best thing. That could be one of us, that could be our leadership, or that could be someone on our team. So the power that data gives us, it turns data into information, and information into insight, which allows us to make better decisions, allows us to make data-driven decisions, which then have significant positive outcomes. And we'll talk a little more about that in the next couple of slides. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of key data points available to pre-sales, and these data points help us make decisions, right? But as we pull the list, data can be paralytic, and it can get you into deep analysis. So it's really important to really look at what matters, right? So there's this book called Measure What Matters, and it's really impactful because there's you have SE engagement activities that David just talked about, which are meetings or business reviews or other SE engagements that pre-sales takes part in. There's technical validation activities like demos, trials, POCs, RFPs, and others. And then you have conversion rates of these activities. So a demo may have a conversion rate. A trial has a different conversion rate. A POC has typically a much higher conversion rate. And then if you add all of these three together, these three activities, your conversion rate should be a lot higher. But then there's conversion rate without these activities. So when you close an opportunity without any of these pre-sales motions, that there's a conversion rate to that too. Then you can start looking at sales stages of these activities. So with different sales stages, you have, should you be doing a demo in sales stage one versus 2 or 3, or should you be doing a POC in your discovery calls, right? Or should you be throwing out a POC in your discovery calls? We've all been in meetings as SCs in the past where a POC was thrown in as an interest generation tool, right? That's not, I think we all know that's not a good practice. So it's that, and then there's aging of opportunities. So as opportunities become older, what is the right tool, right pre-sales tool to apply at that point, right? And then you can go deeper into analysis of, hey, what is the impact of pre-sales activities in opportunities that we win versus opportunities that we lose, right? Should we win quicker, and should we lose quicker as well, right? But if you do analysis of your lost opportunities, more often than not, what you're going to find is you lose slow, where your opportunity just drags out and it, it sucks up all your resources and you lose after a long time. So is there a way to optimize that? And then you can leverage these data points based on the kind of products that you have, whether it's strategic products or commodity products. And some organizations have that, where they have commodity products which are easily consumable, and then they have really strategic products which require a lot of integration or require a lot of involvement from the customer. And then there's specialists. So a lot of larger organizations have specialist pillars, and you involve them into the sales cycle, and it makes it, you now have multiple SEs or multiple technical pre-sales resources in that opportunity trying to contribute to that win. So how do you determine when to involve a specialist based on trends that you see from data, or what their specific contribution is to that opportunity? There is ARPU, right, or price per unit. And using pre-sales tasks or activities has a significant impact on that price per unit. It goes up. And that's, that demonstrates a significant impact that pre-sales has. There's renewal rate of customers, right? So you have, typically organizations have a farming team and a hunting team. And the farming team's goal is to make sure that all the product is consumed, so there's no consumption gap. Make sure that the customers are happy. You do business reviews, and you're set up for renewal, right? Renewal could be flat. It could be with growth, and obviously you want more strategic products attached to that. But a flat renewal may be a good thing too. And then there's customer satisfaction. So all of these in a combination drive high customer satisfaction, right? Because they are now seeing the impact of the technique of the vision that you created during the sales cycle, through these technical validation activities, and how that consummates into the outcome to their business, how their business problem was solved, and they were able to then become a champion within their organization, or get rid of a business challenge, or drive higher productivity, right? Whatever it might be.
Vikram,
So,
I think you're exactly right about the key data points, and specifically the losing slow process. And it's interesting because we had a note or a question from Jay about helping identify where SEs are spending too much time post-sales. And in those slow lose situations, I find that a lot of times the sales team will volunteer more demos, or in extreme cases, proof of concepts, right? Yep. And my talk line conversationally is usually that a POC, while valuable to the customer, almost always extends your deal timeline, right? There should be a very good reason for putting high touch resources into a deal like that. And I think having these data points helps leaders, and certainly individual SEs also, make the case that, hey, maybe we need more post-sales or professional services involvement here, or in some cases where there's a struggle between using billable resources to do pre-sales activities, right, for proof of concept type scenarios, you can make the case for having maybe an escalation tier, like a tier 2 SE or solution architect that would handle more involved situations like POCs, instead of using your frontline sales engineers for very heavy technical activities.
Yeah, you've actually, thanks for that, David. You've actually reminded me of two key things. So one is, so I have 14 managers on my team. And what we've introduced, and this was about 2 years ago, is a decision-making process where every POC that a SE puts in to Salesforce has to be first reviewed and approved by a pre-sales manager before that POC moves forward. And there are times where the SE manager says, I don't think you're ready for a POC yet, or this is not a qualified opportunity for us to do a POC. Or, hey, I don't think we're set up for success because I don't think we can solve the business problem that the customer has. And in those cases, typically we have a conversation with the sales management team and we figure out a way forward. So sometimes we go back and say, sorry, this is not the right time for us to do a POC, or we engage in more qualification activities to help resolve that. Another aspect to this is, how do you handle specific pre-sales tasks by a remote team? We're all remote right now, ironically, but we launched a virtual SE team about 2 years ago, and these are folks in remote offices. So we have we have folks in Costa Rica, in Krakow, in Poland, and now in Malaysia as well. And so a truly global team serving global pre-sales organization, and they help us offload tasks. They help us offload some of the analysis, deep analysis that we want our SEs to do with customers, to then provide us really meaningful insights to our SEs, so they go in armed really well when they're meeting with customers, and we're able to establish deep value right away. So Margie, next click, please. And with all these data points, you can be reactive, where you can just go into meetings where you're reading the news, right? You're telling them, here's what we did in the past. Here's how many POCs we've done. Here's all these demos we've done. And we've certainly, been in that phase, several years ago, where we were reading the news. We were telling people what has already happened. And then you can start to get proactive, where you start to look at trends and you say, okay, based on the trends, I'm as an example, for a particular product, we're doing way too many POCs and our conversion rate is not significant. So we need to dial that down. We need to lead with a demo, and on the back end, work with product and fix the POC, right? Fix the process that leads to that POC. So those proactive steps help allow us to avoid situations or accelerate the deal. And the third thing, which is really the goal, which is where we're, and I'll share in my next slide one of the examples, which is predictive, right? Where you're anticipating things in advance, and almost a leading indicator, and you're able to adapt, and you're able to ask your teams to charge in different directions, change course, or pivot around market conditions. So with that, Margie, next slide, please. Yeah, and so here's the example. The example is forecasting using POCs and generating a gap to plan, right? So, and Margie, you can just build out the first 3 or 4, yeah. So the first thing is, and this is something we've been doing for a couple of years, a little ad hoc, but this year we really streamlined it. We worked with every region in my geo, and we created targets for region. We created POC targets. And we said, hey, here's the amount of dollars that we want to win from POCs. And this could be based on the plan created by ops, or this could be based on historical wins from proof of concepts. So we took that dollar number and then we broke it down by product. And we tasked our pre-sales leaders and our sales leaders to say, how many of those are going to come from product A versus B versus C? So this allows the sales teams to be strategic, to be, to really call the shot early on in the year, and to be able to say, hey, we're going to look at our business and be able to sell X amount of dollars from, this product or the other. And our execution plan then depends on this. You apply historical POC conversion rates to generate pipeline, right? So once you apply those conversion rates, it gives you a gap to plan by product. Next couple of builds, please. And then you generate your gap to plan, and this tells you, what your strength or your weakness is by product. So now you know, okay, based on what I already have in pipeline, I've applied my conversion rate, so I know I'm going to probably win X amount of dollars this year. Here's my gap to target. And when you reverse apply the conversion rate, you then figure out what your pipeline needs to be. So you start with your pipeline and then work with sales and say, okay, we're still short of hitting our plan for the year, and we're short by this much. And to generate this much, we need to, you know, whatever the conversion rate is, have that much pipeline. And to generate that pipeline, here are some of the tasks that we need to undertake, right? So this creates joint accountability. It creates a strong relationship between sales and pre-sales and all the other teams, whether it's professional services or product or marketing, because you're all in this together. And it creates, it brings pre-sales to the forefront in forecasting, because now we're able to sometimes say, yeah, our pipeline looks great, but you know, applying the conversion rates to that, because most of those don't have technical validation activities, you know, I don't think we're going to hit our number, because a lot of times a product weakness can be masked by a significantly large deal, and you know, you then find out later that, you know, a particular product is not doing as well as it should. So Marjorie, I'll preempt the question you asked David, which is what's in it for me, and so what's in it for the organization, right? It helps you, the SC or the SE leader or the organization, to remain competitive and forward thinking, right? Because you're now thinking about things more proactively versus reacting to events. It actually makes you a lot more customer focused, because you know, you're now, you have access to so much data, you know, what products work, what, you know, what may not work in that particular use case. You actually become more cost effective. You're able to now detect new and missed opportunities. As part of this is deep inspection. There's deep inspection on POCs that have been hanging out there with, you know, with the POC complete, but the opportunity hasn't moved out of pipeline, right? And there's deep inspection of those to make sure that, you know, we either close that opportunity out and move forward, or we re-engage and figure out why did that opportunity not move forward. Or looking at
Are you looking at your CRM for this data? Where do you draw your POC data from to break down for this plan?
Yeah, so we use Salesforce, and within Salesforce we use a particular feature called DSR, which stands for Deal Support Request. So we have our SEs, you know, put DSRs in for each activity, and you know, whether it's a demo or a trial or a POC or a customer business review, or could be a specialist workshop or whatever it might be. And that allows us to generate reports within Salesforce, which we can then export to Tableau and create more historical data, create deeper insights.
Thank you.
And there's a question from Dave Johnson, and this is something that I was thinking about as you were talking through it as well. Is there a risk that people offer or perform more POCs in order to hit or exceed a POC forecast?
Yeah, there's always a risk of that, right? And that's you know, that's one of those things where then you rely on your managers. So yes, we're trying to get ahead. We're trying to get more opportunities with a POC, but we also want to make sure they're qualified, right? So that's where the manager approval comes into play, and we review those manager approvals. So the other thing that we mandate is a success criteria needs to be put in, right? So if there's no success criteria that's been agreed upon with the customer in Akamai, we reject that POC.
And the other thing I was thinking about is the usage of this data from a sales leadership perspective. So are you presenting this now to the sales leadership as well?
Yeah, so we, the pre-sales team does our forecast within the sales forecast meetings. We present it to the, you know, to our executive VP on a quarterly basis as well. So this data goes all the way up to our president. So
oh, nice. I think that's huge.
And that's the key thing, right? Data-driven decision making has to be top down, and we're really fortunate to have our leaders, be data oriented. Our CEO was the dean of applied math at MIT, so he's one of the smartest people on the planet, and I think it really comes from there.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Vikram, and folks, as questions come through, I finally figured out what the problem was, so I can now see the Q&A box again. So thank you. And John Graham has some jokes about some sales leadership, apparently, that he knows it. It's Akamai. But let's talk a little bit about, team enablement. And this is interesting. You all mentioned earlier as we were prepping that you had heard us presenting yesterday, and that was actually a question that came up as well yesterday. So in every conversation I have, there's always this big question of, what are companies doing to better improve enablement, especially in large organizations, like VMware, like Akamai, et cetera, that have just massive portfolios that, the core SEs or the SEs that are the account owners really have to tackle. And it's really one that a lot of companies have struggled with. So I'm going to share a little bit about some of the innovative strategies that my team had put forth here at VMware around how we define a data-driven enablement, a data-driven strategy to enablement. And really it came down to, one, trying to understand, what is it that we were trying to solve for, right? So when we look at the role of the solution engineer, and hopefully you all have seen this image of the brain that's split in two, right? You've got the creative brain side of the brain, and then the technical mathematical side of the brain that the SE needs to possess. And that goes to even the responsibilities that an SE needs to be able to execute on a daily basis. So being able to have executive presence, being able to present, a solution and ask critical questions, build up the business acumen. And then you have the underlying products that you're trying to sell that help build some of those, executive presentations that you're actually doing that help formulate the solutions, right? So it's a wide variety of skills and knowledge that the SE needs to have in order to execute effectively in their day-to-day job. So how do we as leaders, and how do other leaders that I've talked to help solve this problem? Well, it comes down to really taking a look at what are the booking and revenue goals that you're trying to solve for, right? So if you have a core solution set, many companies started with one product and then they've added up upon them over time, whether it be through acquisition or organic building, you've added additional solutions, so you've made it more complex, but you still have that core foundation that your company is known for. So for example, VMware, we're known for vSphere, right? Virtualizing, whether it be the data center or the desktop, that's kind of commonly known, and that's where we started, and that was our bread and butter. But as you build products on top of that, you need to be able to provide enablement above and beyond that. And what are our targets for that? So how are we solving for that? And how do we make sure that we're building upon, from a year-over-year growth target, that enablement for it? So what we did was we developed strategic priorities that really helped us as a company, right? So not just the SE organization. We centered around solution-centric enablement and solution-centric selling. So, if you hear in the market what we do, we've positioned around 5 main pillars. That's how we've taken our strategy to the market from an enablement perspective for the SEs as well. So we've centered around the big pillars that the company goes after. And that means that 100% of the SE organization needs to know what those strategic priorities are, and then we build upon that. So then we have the additional revenue goals that we need to build up, right? So let's say we have a specialization bucket where we don't have high number of specialists within the organization. I'll take my solution set. We're a smaller team intentionally because we believe that we can leverage the power of the core organization to help accelerate our selling motion. And John Graham, who's an active chatter right now, has been a great partner there with us in helping build upon that. So we've leveraged programs that we either call, product disciplines or subject matter experts, or you name it, right? Ninjas. We've got like 50 different names within the company for these different programs. And we've asked SEs to focus on specific product areas to help build upon those specialist teams so that they can help bring the message not just to our customers, but also to their teams through a one-to-many approach. And then you scale, the advanced enablement, right, in trying to give individuals kind of a deeper level knowledge of the specific solution set that you're trying to go after and target. And it's very important that I highlight that it needs to be a joint decision. It can't be, I as an SE, I see this shiny new toy, I love it, I want to go learn it. It also needs to be driven by, as a region, as a geo, as a territory, what do I need to focus on to be able to build a team that can support one another, but also take us to market without having to have a very heavy SE organization to target all of the individual products that we have. I'll say that this has been several years in the making, and we continue to tweak it. I know that as every quarter has gone by in my previous role, we always received extremely positive reviews on our quarterly training plans that we would launch within the SE organization. And it requires for there to be a continuous loop of feedback so that you can engage the SE community to hear whether or not your training is on the mark and whether or not they're advancing, and also providing a follow-up mechanism for you to be able to track the activities that the SEs are doing after the fact and help you continue to build that program. So like I said, it needs to be evolutionary. You need to continue to change it. It needs to be focused on what your long-term goals are as an organization, also focusing on some of the short-term initiatives so that you can build that out. Otherwise, you're going to have 50 SEs going through a specific training. They learn nothing because within a week they forget it because they're not using it. So it's extremely important also to build upon that beyond the foundational training. So that was the enablement portion. I know we're coming close here on time, and I don't see any other questions to follow up. So we'll continue moving along in our presentation here. So key takeaways that I want all of you to go back to your companies, go back to your own strategic thinking if you're kind of just trying to figure out what you want to do next, is define and quantify the SE impact. And as both David and Vikram mentioned, it's not just the leaders that need this data, it's also for all of the individual contributors. Each of you takes this information and you can have super huge impact in the way you're driving the business by just understanding what it is that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Activities have a leading indicator, so recognize that tracking is not for tracking's sake, so make sure that you're tracking the right things for the right reasons that will help drive your business forward and help drive decision-making forward as well. And, a lot of SEs, I know earlier on in my career in selling motions, SEs would question why they needed to bother with a forecast. They would always claim that that was a sales rep's job. As you saw from the data points that that Vikram had made, your impact is huge in managing the forecast. I have seen, other organizations do a really good job in managing that information and being able to call out a deal that was in forecast, de-risk it out and pull it out of the forecast so that leaders weren't committing to something that wasn't actually going to come through based on SE input. I know we always, are concerned about the challenges that might create in terms of rift between a rep and an SE, but that means that we need to start the communication down at the frontline level, right? SEs that are out there, make sure you're having that crucial conversation with your reps and engaging them in the conversation and letting them know well ahead of time that, what you think is happening with the deal. And really, from an enablement perspective, for the SEs that are out there that have massive portfolios that you have to support or multiple products that you need to support, have that chat with your manager. Or for the managers that are on here, review kind of what your business needs are. Make sure that you're evaluating the overall needs of your organization. Don't put too heavy a weight on one specific product because it's the new product that you have. Evaluate everything as a whole and see what your customers need and what your customers are asking for. So I really hope that you all enjoyed the session today. I wanted to leave a few minutes here for any additional Q&A that the audience might have. All right, so let's go ahead and a quick poll here for folks on how we did today. This is more for us to make sure that we're in the future capturing the right topics, and that we're putting together the right information for you all. And while you all are voting, quick shout out to Vivin, who is our sponsor today for our presentation. As David had mentioned earlier, it really helps unlock some of the strategic potential for what an SE organization can do and really help you get additional information. It provides additional market fit as well as forecast accuracy for your organizations. And as I mentioned earlier, if you're not part of the Slack channel, please join us. There's, I think, about 500 members already that I've seen join over the past couple of weeks. I'm super excited about the community and the collaboration and information that's already been shared. So join us there. And quick preview on what's coming in the next few webinars. So we've got, the next one is the leveraging storytelling and pre-sales. I think this is huge. This will be a ton of fun for all level of experience of SEs. And then the next one will be, and something to note is that one is meant to kind of cater towards the Asia Pac community. But hopefully if you can't catch it at the later time in the evening, you can catch the recording afterwards. And then the Making Your Pre-Sales Team an Innovation Center. I'm really excited about this one. I think there's going to be a ton of great information to be shared here around what SE teams can do from an innovation perspective. And then finally, if you all haven't seen, there's a podcast as well for the PreSales Collective. New episodes are being released every Monday. I saw that John Kerr actually just did one, so I'm looking forward to listening to that one myself. And hopefully you all make some time to catch up on the podcast as well. So huge thank you to our panelists. Really thankful for all of the great information that you shared. I think there was just so many different nuggets and highlights there. So thank you for the time and the participation here. And thank you to all of our participants. I'm looking forward to participating with you in the future, as well as seeing you on the Slack channel.
Margie, I just want to add a quick note here. For anyone else that has any questions about things that I presented, feel free to reach out to me. You can connect with me through LinkedIn, and I'm happy to help on the side. And secondly, Margie, I want to thank you for being such a great host today.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. All right, everyone, have a wonderful week.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.